Freezing. Canine, German Shepherd begs to enter a house. What? The ex-soldier discovers will shock you. A freezing winter night, a shivering canine German Shepherd, and a man who thought his past was behind him. When former soldier Ethan Carter hears scratching at his door, he never expects to find a half-frozen canine dog desperately trying to get inside. But the moment he lets the animal in, something feels off. This isn't just a stray dog. This canine is trained, disciplined, and clearly searching for something. And when Ethan uncovers the shocking truth about this dog's past, his entire world is turned upside down. Stay with us for a heart-stopping journey of survival, loyalty, and a mystery that will leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more incredible stories like this to you. Let's get started. The wind howled through the empty fields, carrying snowflakes that clung to the tall pine trees surrounding Ethan Carter's isolated cabin. The heater hummed softly inside, offering a sharp contrast to the brutal cold outside. Ethan sat in his worn-out recliner, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, lost in his own thoughts. It had been almost 3 years since he left the military. 3 years since the last mission that had cost him everything: his career, his friends, his sense of purpose. The solitude of the mountains had been his way of escaping the world, a world that no longer made sense to him. But tonight, something felt different. A faint scratching sound cut through the wind. Ethan frowned, sitting up. He turned down the TV, listening carefully. There it was again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Someone, or something, was at his door. Instinct kicked in. Years of combat training didn't fade easily. Ethan grabbed the Glock he kept on the table and moved toward the door, his muscles tense. He slowly unlocked it and cracked it open, ready for anything, except for what he actually saw. A German Shepherd stood on his porch, shivering violently. The dog's fur was covered in ice and snow, its breath forming desperate white puffs in the freezing air. Its ears twitched at the sight of Ethan, but instead of running or growling, it whimpered, a broken, desperate sound. Ethan hesitated. He had seen plenty of stray dogs before, but not like this one. This dog wasn't some lost house pet. It was trained. His eyes darted to the military-grade harness still strapped to the dog's body. Though it was tattered and covered in frost, Ethan recognized it immediately. A K9 unit. His grip on the gun tightened. A military dog? Out here in the middle of nowhere? Alone? Something wasn't right. The dog lowered itself, pressing its belly against the frozen porch as if it was begging for help. Ethan exhaled sharply. You're gonna freeze to death out here. He opened the door fully, stepping aside. The dog hesitated for a second, then staggered inside, collapsing onto the wooden floor. Ethan quickly shut the door and locked it. The dog lay there, panting, steam rising from its damp fur as the warmth of the cabin hit it. Its ribs were visible beneath its thick coat, signs of exhaustion and hunger clear on its face. Ethan knelt beside it, studying its features. You're not just some stray, he murmured. Where the hell did you come from? The dog blinked up at him with tired, dark eyes. There was something in them, something human-like. Trust. Ethan sighed and stood up. He grabbed a blanket from the couch and wrapped it around the dog, rubbing its fur to help warm it up. Then, he walked to the kitchen, pouring water into a bowl and setting it down. The dog lifted its head weakly and drank like it hadn't seen water in days. Ethan ran a hand through his short-cropped hair. His instincts screamed that something was off. A military canine abandoned in the middle of a blizzard? Impossible. His eyes fell on the harness again. He reached down and carefully unclipped it, turning it over in his hands. The fabric was worn, the patches mostly ripped away, except for one name still visible on the side. His breath caught in his throat. He knew that name. It was the name of a canine that had gone missing 2 years ago, on the same mission that ended his career. Ethan's pulse pounded. He looked down at the dog, and for the first time he truly saw him. It couldn't be, but it was. "Ghost?" he whispered. The dog's ears perked up, and in that moment, Ethan knew. This wasn't just any canine. This was his canine, the dog he had been forced to leave behind, the dog that should have been dead. And now, 2 years later, in the middle of nowhere, Ghost had come back. Ethan's breath came in slow, measured intervals, but inside his mind was racing. He stared at the half-frozen canine lying in front of him. Ghost. His canine. The dog he had believed to be dead. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Ghost had been part of his final mission, the one that had changed everything. That ambush in Afghanistan, it had gone sideways fast. Ethan had been injured. His team had barely made it out, and in the chaos, Ghost had disappeared. They had searched, but when no trace of him was found, Command had declared him KIA, killed in action. But he wasn't dead. He was here. Now. Ghost's dark eyes were fixed on Ethan, filled with exhaustion, but still sharp, still aware. There was recognition there. He knew who Ethan was. Ethan knelt, placing a cautious hand on the Ghost's side. The dog flinched, instinctively tensing, but then he relaxed. That trust was still there. Ethan felt his throat tighten. "It's really you." Ghost's tail twitched slightly, weak but unmistakable. Ethan exhaled sharply. This wasn't a dream. This was real. He quickly switched to survival mode. Ghost was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and dangerously cold. Ethan grabbed a towel, gently drying the melting snow off the dog's fur. "You must have been out there for days," he murmured, wrapping the towel around Ghost's shivering body. "How the hell did you survive?" Ghost didn't answer, of course. But as Ethan worked, his hands brushing over Ghost's frame, he felt something rough, uneven beneath the fur. His fingers froze. Scar tissue. Fresh scars. Ethan's jaw tightened. Ghost hadn't just been lost. Someone had hurt him. The realization sent a wave of anger through him. Ghost had been the best canine on the team. Strong, smart, fearless. He had saved lives, including Ethan's. And now, 2 years later, he had somehow found his way back. Injured, starving, barely alive. Ethan clenched his fists. Who did this to you? The question burned in his mind. But first, he had to focus on keeping Ghost alive. He reached into his kitchen, pulling out some cooked chicken and rice. It wasn't dog food, but it would do for now. Ghost's ears perked at the smell, and as Ethan set the bowl down, the dog slowly lifted his head. Then, with quiet desperation, he began to eat. Ethan sat back, watching him carefully. His military instincts told him that Ghost's condition wasn't just the result of time. Someone had kept him, used him, hurt him. And yet, despite everything, Ghost had found a way back to him. But why now? Ethan's eyes drifted back to the damaged harness he had taken off Ghost's body. His fingers traced the worn-out fabric until he noticed something hidden in the inner lining. A tracking chip. Ethan's stomach dropped. Someone had been tracking Ghost, and if they knew where he was, they'd be coming for him. Ethan stood abruptly, his military instincts screaming into action. He grabbed his phone, pulled up an encrypted app, and began running a scan on the chip. Within seconds, a location ID popped up on the screen. His blood ran cold. The coordinates weren't random. They led straight to a classified military contractor's base. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. This wasn't just a missing canine case. Ghost hadn't been lost. He had been taken. And now, Ethan was about to find out why. Ethan's pulse pounded as he stared at the tracking chip's coordinates. A classified military contractor's base. Ghost hadn't been lost all these years. He had been taken, used, and now, for some reason, he had escaped. Ethan clenched his jaw, his mind shifting back into combat mode. He knelt next to Ghost, running his fingers along the old scars. Some were from their missions together. But others, the fresh ones, they were different. More recent. More brutal. Ethan had seen enough covert operations to know the signs. Torture, experimentation, conditioning. Someone had turned Ghost into something else, a weapon, and Ghost had fought his way back. The weight of that realization settled heavy in Ethan's chest. His loyal canine had survived 2 years of hell, somehow broken free, and then, despite the distance, the trauma, and the unknown, he had come back to Ethan. But why now? Ethan's eyes flickered to the frosted window, paranoia creeping in. If Ghost had been tracked, someone would come looking for him, and if they wanted him back this badly, they wouldn't be asking nicely. Ethan's hands tightened into fists. No way in hell was he letting them take Ghost again. He quickly grabbed his laptop and plugged the tracking chip into an external scanner. Within seconds, the last known pings of Ghost's movements appeared on the screen. His heart sank. The K9 training facility where they had last worked together? Burned down 2 years ago. A military black site in Nevada? Shut down mysteriously. A hidden lab facility in Virginia? Still active. That was the contractor's base the tracking chip was linked to. Ethan's gut twisted. Ghost had been shuffled around, his location covered up. Someone had been using him for classified operations, but something had gone wrong. He escaped. And if Ghost had escaped, that meant there were more secrets buried behind this than Ethan could even begin to imagine. He turned back to Ghost, who was now curled up near the fireplace, watching him. "You're not just any missing canine, buddy," Ethan muttered. "You're carrying something they don't want found." Ghost's ears twitched. His body was still weak, but there was an alertness to him, like he understood every word. Ethan rubbed his face, exhaling. He needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. He pulled out an old satellite phone, one he hadn't touched in years. There was only one person who would have the kind of information he needed. A former contact in military intelligence. He dialed. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Carter?" The voice was wary. Ethan cut straight to the point. "I need intel on a military K9 unit that went missing 2 years ago, codenamed Ghost." Silence. Then, "Walk away, Carter." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "I don't walk away. You know that." A sigh. Then, the voice dropped lower. "If you found him, you're already in deep." Ethan's chest tightened. What happened to him? The voice hesitated. "You ever heard of Project Revenant?" Ethan's blood went cold. That name, he had heard it before. A classified black ops experiment. He had never been given details, but rumors swirled about soldiers being enhanced for operations that never officially existed. "You're telling me they ran it on a K9?" Ethan's voice was sharp. "Not just any K9, the voice replied. Ghost was the prototype. Ethan's stomach dropped. Prototype? Of what? "You need to disappear, Carter," the voice warned. "They're gonna come looking for him. And when they do, they won't leave witnesses." A click. The line went dead. Ethan slowly lowered the phone. Ghost lifted his head, staring at him. Waiting. Ethan swallowed hard. Project Revenant. Prototype. Weaponized K9. Ghost hadn't just been stolen. He had been turned into something else. And now, whoever had done it would be coming to take him back. Ethan moved quickly through the underground tunnel, his heart pounding as he heard the muffled voices above. They were inside the cabin now, searching, moving fast. He knew their type, highly trained, no hesitation, kill orders in place. Ghost stayed close, his paws silent against the cold dirt floor. Despite his exhaustion, the dog's instincts were still sharp. He knew what this was. A hunt. Ethan reached the end of the tunnel, where an old wooden hatch led outside just beyond the tree line. He pressed his ear against the wood, listening. Silence. But silence didn't mean safety. Slowly he pushed the hatch open. Gun raised, snowflakes drifted through the air, the forest still and dark, no movement. Yet, he motioned for Ghost to follow, and the dog leaped out first, his nose lifting as he sniffed the air. Alert, focused, ready. Ethan followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them. His mind worked fast. They needed a vehicle. His old truck was too close to the cabin, but a mile down the road, hidden beneath a camouflaged tarp, was an ATV he kept for emergencies. This was an emergency. A voice crackled in his stolen earpiece. Negative on the target. The dog's not here. A pause. Then, find them. No loose ends. Ethan exhaled slowly. They weren't giving up. Ghost tensed beside him, ears flicking toward the trees. Then, a sound. Footsteps crunching in the snow. Close, Ethan pressed his back against a tree, raising his rifle. The figures moved in pairs, tactical, sweeping with night vision. They were flanking him. He clenched his jaw. If he fired now, he'd give away their position. But if he didn't? A soft growl rumbled from Ghost's throat. Ethan looked down. Ghost wasn't looking at the men. He was looking past them. That's when Ethan saw it. A third operative, creeping behind him, silenced, pistol in hand. No time to think. Ethan moved first, pivoting sharply, but Ghost was faster. The dog lunged, teeth flashing in the moonlight. The man barely had time to react before Ghost's jaws clamped down on his forearm, yanking him back. A muffled cry. A gunshot fired wildly into the sky. Ethan didn't hesitate. He silenced the threat with one swift shot. Ghost let go, his muzzle dripping with blood, his breath heavy. But his eyes? Focused, unshaken. Ethan knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his fur. Good boy. No time to rest. The other men had heard the shot. Ethan grabbed Ghost's harness and ran. The ATV was close, just a few hundred yards. Behind them, the operatives moved fast, their voices sharp. Shots fired! They're moving west! Cut them off! Ethan pushed harder, his legs burning from the gulp and adrenaline. The tarp came into view. He yanked it off, revealing the ATV. No time for stealth. He jumped on, Ghost leaping up behind him as if they had done this 1,000 times. The engine roared to life. Flashlights swung toward them. There, take them down! A bullet whizzed past Ethan's head. He twisted the throttle, tires kicking up snow as they tore through the forest. Branches snapped. More gunfire. The ATV skidded on the ice, but Ethan held firm, weaving through the trees. Ghost crouched low behind him, body pressed tight. The road was ahead, if they could make it. Another shot. The back tire exploded. The ATV lurched, spinning out of control. Ethan jumped, twisting mid-air to shield Ghost as they hit the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him, pain exploding through his ribs. Snow flew everywhere. Silence. Then, boots crunching closer. A voice, cold, unforgiving. End of the road, Carter. Ethan coughed, rolling onto his side. His vision blurred, but through the haze, he saw the muzzle of a rifle aimed at his head. Ghost snarled, struggling to get up. Ethan's fingers inched toward his pistol, but he knew He was out of time. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. And then, a deafening explosion tore through the trees. Fire, smoke, screams. The operative spun in shock. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Ghost and ran. He didn't know what caused the explosion, but whoever had done it wasn't working for them. Ethan sprinted through the snow, lungs burning, Ghost limping but keeping pace beside him. The explosion behind them had thrown the entire forest into chaos. Flames flickered against the trees, casting long, erratic shadows. Whoever had set off that blast wasn't part of the kill team, and that meant someone else was in play. Gunfire erupted behind them. The operatives were disoriented, shouting orders over the radio. Ethan took the moment to dive behind a fallen log, pulling Ghost down with him. His fingers pressed against his side, wincing. Ribs bruised, maybe cracked. He had taken worse. No time to dwell on it. Ghost's ears perked up. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ethan turned his head sharply, scanning the darkness. Someone was coming. The sound of boots crunching through snow grew closer, but the pattern was off. Whoever it was moved alone, unlike the tactical formations the operatives used. Ethan raised his gun, finger poised on the trigger. Ghost tensed beside him. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. A woman, dressed in dark tactical gear, a rifle slung over her back. Not one of them. She stopped a few feet away, hands slightly raised. Non-threatening, but not defenseless. "Ethan Carter?" Her voice was sharp, steady. Not surprised. Ethan's grip on the gun didn't waver. "Depends who's asking." The woman smirked. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Ethan's eyes flickered over her face. Strong features, piercing green eyes, a small scar on her temple. Something nagged at his memory. And then, it hit him. Sarah Wolf. His voice was flat, disbelieving. Former CIA Black Ops. Thought to be dead. Sarah nodded. "Glad to know you still have a good memory." Ethan didn't lower his gun. "Last I checked, you were 6 feet under," she smirked. "Last I checked, your K9 was dead too." Ethan stiffened. Ghost growled. Sarah's eyes flicked down to the dog. "Looks like we were both misinformed." A fresh burst of gunfire snapped them back into reality. Sarah turned her head toward the operatives, then back to Ethan. "We don't have much time. You need to come with me." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Give me one reason I should trust you." Sarah exhaled. "Because the people chasing you? They're the same ones who tried to kill me. And if you don't want Ghost back in their hands, you're going to have to start running." She wasn't wrong. Ethan looked at Ghost, who was still locked onto Sarah like a predator watching prey. He trusted no one, just like Ethan. But the difference was, Ghost had found his way back to Ethan. And now, someone had led them out of an ambush instead of into one. Ethan made a decision. Lead the way. The escape route. Sarah led them deeper into the forest, moving with expert precision. "We can't take the roads," she muttered. "They have drones watching everything." Ethan glanced at her. "How do you know so much?" Sarah sighed. "Because I used to work for them." Ethan stilled. "Project Revenant?" She nodded grimly. "I was the lead analyst assigned to the case, until I started asking the wrong questions." Ethan's stomach twisted. "They tried to kill you?" Sarah let out a humorless chuckle. "More like erase me." Ethan exhaled sharply. "And now? Now I'm doing the one thing I never thought I'd do, helping someone else survive." Ghost suddenly stopped, ears up, body rigid. Ethan raised his gun. "What is it?" Sarah frowned. "We're not alone." The forest was dead silent, too silent. Then, a crackle in Ethan's stolen earpiece. A voice, cold, commanding. "We see you." Ethan's blood ran cold. Sarah cursed. "They found us." And then, the first bullet tore through the trees. The first bullet sliced through the air, barely missing Ethan's head. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing Sarah's arm, he pulled her behind a fallen tree, Ghost right beside them. The gunfire was precise, controlled. They weren't guessing. They knew where Ethan and Sarah were. "They're tracking us," Sarah hissed, pressing her back against the bark. Thermal imaging. Ethan's mind worked fast. If they had drones in the air, there was no hiding. They had to move, or die. Ghost's ears twitched, nose flaring. He was locked onto something, sensing danger before Ethan even saw it. A shadow moved beyond the trees. Ethan gave Ghost a sharp command. "Flush him out." Ghost shot forward like a missile. The first operative barely had time to turn before Ghost's jaws clamped down on his forearm. A muffled scream, a gun clattering into the snow. Ethan fired one clean shot. One man down. Sarah spun, dropping another approaching operative with 2 precise rounds. "We can't win this fight," she muttered. "We have to go." Another figure loomed from the trees. Ethan fired, but the man was fast, diving behind cover. The suppressor on his rifle spat back a burst of rounds, forcing Ethan and Sarah lower. Sarah pulled a small device from her belt, clicking a switch. A sudden pulse of energy ripped through the air. The drone overhead flickered, then dropped. The attackers hesitated, just long enough for Ethan and Sarah to break into a sprint. "Move!" Ethan barked. Ghost was already ahead, leading the way through the snow. The forest stretched before them, but Ethan knew they couldn't run forever. Sarah glanced back, her breathing sharp. "We need an extraction point." "There's a safe house," Ethan said, pushing forward. "Old Ranger Station, 2 miles east." Sarah nodded. "Then let's move." Behind them, the operatives regrouped. The chase wasn't over. It was just getting started. The ranger station was barely standing, but it was enough. Ethan kicked open the door, ushering Sarah and Ghost inside. Sarah checked her pistol. 3 rounds left. Ethan counted his. 5. Not enough. Ghost paced the room, still alert. He knew the danger wasn't over. Ethan moved to the window. The forest stretched for miles, silent, still. A lie. They were out there, watching, waiting. Sarah let out a slow breath. "We're not getting out of this clean, are we?" Ethan shook his head. "No, we're not." Sarah's expression hardened. "Then, we make this count." Ghost suddenly growled, his body tense. A radio crackled from the fallen operative's gear, a voice, cold and calm. "You've run far enough, Carter." Ethan stilled. He knew that voice. Ghost's ears flattened, a low whine in his throat. "You don't have to die tonight. Just hand over the dog." Sarah's eyes flickered to Ethan. "Who the hell is that?" Ethan didn't answer. His grip on his rifle tightened. "The man who ordered me to leave Ghost behind." Silence. Then the voice returned. "You have 1 hour. After that, we burn it all." Sarah exhaled sharply. "They're going to level this place." Ethan looked at Ghost, then at Sarah. Ghost wasn't just a K9 anymore. He was family. Ethan made his decision. "We're not waiting." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then what's the plan?" Ethan exhaled. "We take the fight to them." Ethan moved with precision, every instinct sharpened. 1 hour. That's what they had before this place became a war zone. Waiting was not an option. If they wanted Ghost back that badly, Ethan wasn't going to sit around and let them take him. Sarah reloaded her weapon with what little ammo she had left. "You sure about this?" Ethan looked at Ghost, the dog's breath steady but his body tense. He was ready. He had been fighting to survive for 2 years, and now Ethan was going to make sure no one took him again. "I'm done running," Ethan said. "We end this." Sarah gave a slow nod. "All right then, let's make it hurt." Ethan grabbed a flare gun from the station's supply box and shot it high into the sky. A bright red streak cut through the night, burning like a beacon. Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you insane? You just told them exactly where we are," Ethan smirked. "Exactly." Minutes later, they came. The sound of engines rumbled through the forest, headlights cutting through the trees. Black SUVs rolled in, a dozen armed operatives fanning out like wolves closing in on prey. Ethan watched from cover, keeping Ghost low. Sarah crouched beside him, scanning the team's formation. "They don't expect a fight. They think we're desperate." Ethan chambered around. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The first shot cracked through the night, dropping one of the operatives before the others could react. Chaos erupted. Shouts, scrambling bodies, gunfire. Sarah moved fast, taking out another. Ghost sprang from the shadows, launching himself onto an attacker, knocking him to the ground before tearing the rifle from his grip. The man screamed as Ghost growled over him, but there was no time to stop. Ethan had more threats to handle. More gunfire. Ethan spun, taking down another, before diving behind cover. Sarah was pinned near the station's wall, exchanging fire. Then, a new sound. A helicopter. Ethan's stomach dropped. Bright floodlights swept over the battlefield, blinding him momentarily. A voice echoed over a loudspeaker. "Stand down, Carter. Last warning." Ethan gritted his teeth. They weren't here to capture him. They were here to kill him. Then, Ghost's growl deepened. Ethan followed the dog's gaze, and that's when he saw him. A man stood near the SUVs, arms crossed, watching. Calm. Unshaken. Ethan recognized him instantly. Commander Marcus Slate. The man who left Ghost for dead. The man who had ordered Ethan to abandon him. Everything inside Ethan boiled over. Slate smirked. He lifted his radio and spoke into it, but this time, not to his men. "Carter, you've always been a problem, but this time, you're out of options." Ethan exhaled slowly, steadying his grip. "That's where you're wrong," he muttered. And then, he fired, straight at Slate. Ethan fired. The bullet ripped through the night, aiming straight for Slate. But the commander moved fast. A soldier tackled him aside just in time. The shot grazing his shoulder instead of hitting center mass. Chaos exploded. The operatives intensified their assault, bullets shredding through the trees and splintering wood all around. The helicopter circled lower, its spotlight locking onto Ethan's position. Ghost lunged at an attacker trying to flank them, his powerful yanks clamping onto the man's arm. A scream, a struggle. Ghost never let go. Sarah threw Ethan a sharp glance. "We need an exit, now!" Ethan saw their only chance. The abandoned military truck left by the operatives. If they could reach it, they had a shot at escaping. "Cover me!" Ethan yelled, grabbing Ghost's harness and sprinting toward the vehicle. Sarah laid down fire, forcing the remaining men to duck for cover. Ethan tore open the truck door, yanked the ignition wires, and sparked the engine to life. Ghost leapt into the passenger seat as Sarah ran toward them, diving in just as bullets slammed into the truck's side. "Go!" she shouted. Ethan floored the gas. The truck roared forward, smashing through the trees as bullets chased them. The helicopter swung overhead, repositioning. They weren't letting them go that easily. Sarah grabbed a rifle from the truck's floor and leaned out the window. "We need to take that chopper down." Ethan swerved, dodging a burst of machine gun fire from above. His eyes locked onto the edge of the forest, a sharp drop-off leading to a frozen river below. A risky move, but the only one they had. "Hold on!" Ethan yelled. Sarah's eyes widened. "Carter, don't you The truck flew off the cliff. For a split second, everything went silent. Then, the impact. The truck slammed onto the ice, skidding wildly before crashing against a snowbank. The windshield cracked but held. They were alive. Ethan groaned, shaking off the daze. Ghost was already alert, nudging him, making sure he was okay. Sarah coughed. "You're insane," Ethan smirked. "And yet, we're still breathing." The helicopter circled above, searching, but the heavy snowfall gave them cover. They couldn't be seen. Sarah exhaled in relief. "We bought time." Ethan looked at Ghost, running a hand over his fur. "We got him out." Ghost licked Ethan's hand, a silent promise. For 2 years, he had fought to return to Ethan. And now, Ethan had fought to keep him free. Slate would keep hunting. The truth behind Project Revenant was still out there, but for now, they had won. The soldier and his K9 were finally home.